Hi, it's Igor Martinovic. I'm a director of photography on The Outsider, first 2 episodes, and I'm a director on the episode 5.
Hi, this is Zak Mulligan. I'm the director of photography on The Outsider, episodes 5, 7, and 9, and you're listening to the Go Creative Show.
Hey everyone, my name is Ben Consoli. I'm a director and owner of BC Media Productions. And this is the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. I have been waiting for this episode for a while now because I am completely obsessed with the show The Outsider on HBO. And we've got Igor Martinovic and Zak Mulligan both on the show today. Igor and Zak both are directors of photography for various episodes of the season. And Igor was a director for one of the episodes that Zak shot. So we've got a lot of information in here about how cinematographers and directors work together, that transition from being a director of photography to a director, and a huge discussion on something I think is extremely important, how Zak and Igor used camera movement, framing, and focus to help support the stories in the series. So it's a really interesting discussion, and we talk about things that we don't normally talk about on Go Creative Show, and I think you guys are going to learn a lot in this episode. The Go Creative Show is supported by PostLab, stress-free collaboration for Final Cut Pro 10, and Rule Boston Camera, buy, rent, create at rule.com. And I want to encourage you guys to subscribe to Go Creative Show on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode, and follow us on all social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and now YouTube as well, because when we have upcoming guests, we give you the opportunity to ask your questions and have them heard on the show. In fact, you're going to hear 2 or 3 questions today directly from Go Creative Show listeners. So let's dive right into it because we've got so much to discuss with Igor Martinovic and Zak Mulligan, directors of photography for HBO's The Outsider. So I'm here with Igor Martinovic and Zak Mulligan, 2 directors of photography for The Outsider on HBO. Guys, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Hi, great to be here.
So both of you have been on before. Zak, we had you on for 7 Deadly Sins. And Igor, we had you on twice, I think, House of Cards and The Night Of.
Correct.
And a lot of time has passed since then, and I want people to get familiar with your voices. So Zak, let's just get a little introduction from you. I'd like to know how you're involved in The Outsider.
So I shot 3 episodes of The Outsider. I did episodes 5, 7, and 9. 5 and 7 are out. I think 9 is probably in a week or 2. I've known Igor for about 10 years. I think we met at Sundance in 2010, I believe, when I had a film there that year. And Igor was kind enough to link me up with Jason Bateman, and met up with Jason, and the rest is history.
And you were the cinematographer for Igor's episode that you directed. So I think that's an interesting tie-in too. So Igor, talk to me about your involvement in The Outsider.
So Jason and I spoke when he was, Jason Bateman and I spoke when he was doing The Ozark. I couldn't join him on The Ozark at that time. And then when the time came to do The Outsider, he called me in and he said, do you want to shoot it? I said, yeah, absolutely. I would love to. And then he also suggested, asked me if I would consider directing. And it kind of took me as a surprise. I do want to direct here and there, but there was another kind of like a bonus thing. And so we decided that I would shoot first 2 episodes, try to set up the look, and then start prepping to direct the episode 5 that Zak shot for me.
What do you think it was in you that Jason saw that said, Igor's going to be a great director?
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, I think his instinct was to hire me as a DP because he liked the way The Night Of looked, and he thought that The Outsider should have some of that darker, moodier look. And that was the beginning of the conversation. But then we spent like maybe a few hours talking, and that's when he said, asked me if I want to direct. I mean, I guess the way I prepare for the shooting a cinematography position is always from the perspective of the story and trying to analyze the story and see what are the motivations, what are the whose perspective we take within the story, and all those things. I think somewhere in the line of like directing work as well. So I kind of try to combine those things, and I think that might prompt him to suggest.
Did you find it easy, challenging to make that transition?
I think it was fairly easy because since I shot first two episodes, I knew the cast. The cast knew me, so that was kind of easy transition. The crew, the same thing. So I came into familiar territory. In TV, it could be sometimes tricky because one tends to, when directors come in, the crew is already like on episode 7 or 8, and directors, it's they're having a little bit of a hard time to fit in because they just come in. There is no prep time. There is no introduction to cast. The cast knows what their characters are. So directors have it's much harder than what I had because I was familiar with the story, with the cast, with the crew, and it was fairly easy.
So The Outsider is based on a Stephen King novel. I'm curious how involved Stephen King was. Either one of you, can you talk to Stephen King's involvement?
I think he gave a lot of freedom to Richard Price, who is an excellent writer, and I think it was I don't think he was involved in a day. Definitely wasn't involved day to day. Neither in particular episodes, but he might have been involved in some overall strategy in how to portray certain characters. I think there was he was involved with changing Cynthia Erivo character because in his book she was Caucasian, and in the series she's African American. So I think there was some conversations about that, but I'm not 100% sure that there was a big involvement there.
He's really had. It's even weird to say resurgence because he never went away, obviously, but seems like in the last couple of years, his movies are everywhere. His TV shows are everywhere. Stephen King, it's sort of very much, again, all over media. And it sort of makes me think like, what is it about scary and suspenseful stories that are so attractive to viewers? What do you think, Zak?
I mean, I just think with horror that, there's something very primal and intrinsically human about the experience, and being scared, I think awakens just something deep inside people. Stephen King's one of the best in that business.
I think he shines the most personally. I think obviously as an author, certainly, but it's that famous story of how he famously hated The Shining because it was too much of a departure from his original story. But clearly, The Shining lives on its own as an amazing film. I think there is something about the adaptation of a book to film where you kind of have to take a different approach to make it work in film. You can't stay super duper close to the novel sometimes. You got to have a little bit of creative freedom. Igor, do you feel like you had the creative freedom you needed to work through these stories visually?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think in general, when you work with HBO or when you work with Netflix, there is a enormous freedom that comes with it. It's something that I think new media helped as well, because what happened was for years, I think that television was a writer's medium, and it still largely is. But there is definitely a movement towards having more stronger directors or writers directors that give TV series a little bit more filmic approach, but the freedom is there. There is no one coming in and saying, "Oh, you cannot do it dark or this color or that coverage," or you're free to come up with a style that suits the narrative. And either as a director or as a cinematographer, I think both of those exist. It's the restrictions come in where when you set up what is set up as a set of rules as in a series. So if you come in as a new director within a series, it's a little you have to adapt to that, but it's not applied from above.
Zak, you come in episode 5, right?
Yep.
And that was your first of 3 episodes.
Yep.
And now you're working with Igor as your director. Tell me about the way that you two work and how it is for you being the director of photography for a director who also is a director of photography.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that relationship.
Well, I think it was a real gift. To be able to work with Igor, who, did the first block of episodes, set the look, provided, I think, just a real shortcut into the series. If I ever had a question about, how you might want to visually approach something or approach a lighting setup, my director was right there who had set the look. So it was a really great way to have a first episode on the series. And Igor is, incredibly talented and collaborative. And also there's, 2 cinematographers speaking that language. It was just really easy. Sometimes there's a lot of different types of directors. Some directors are more visual. Some are more, kind of care more about performance. And, with Igor, we could really talk very specifically about, lenses or camera movement and this kind of thing. It was a great experience.
On The Outsider, we've got 4 different cinematographers. I want to talk a little bit to you, Igor, about how you are maintaining consistency. You did the pilot, you did the first 2 episodes, so you really are largely kind of setting the tone for the entire series. How do you create consistency across all the cinematographers and all the episodes after yours?
There are certain things that are set up in terms of the look by Jason Bateman, because it's his show. So there are rules on when to use handheld, how just certain things that are directorial choices that influence the way it's shot as well. And at the same time goes with cinematography choices that like we established there is a certain moodiness to the image. There is a certain color scheme that is applied. So it's already there. Production designer, costume designer, everyone is on board with that. So there is also a DIT who is really important in keeping consistency of a look, as well as operators who stayed throughout the series. So you have numerous people that have been involved from the very beginning, and in a way kind of protecting, maybe that's such too strong of a word, but collaborating with the DPs that come in and just giving a little bit of a guidance, a little bit of guidance, I think, where it should everything should go. But also we had lots of conversations before Zak came on, or with other cinematographers. Like you just talk about what is the look, and then everyone is completely allowed to change things and to move things and to enhance it. And I think that's the point of it, because if you're just going to stay and because cinematography evolves as the story evolves. So I think you just need to apply the concept that is original concept, but then you move it as you change it as the story changes, as new characters evolve, as it becomes a little bit more supernatural. Then cinematography can take plunge into a little bit more unusual framing or colors or contrast. Just those things. And I think it's great as the series progresses that the look evolves. I think it's just a plus side for any series.
That's an interesting concept in that the cinematography will change as the story evolves. Because I do think that's really important. And I do think that this story in particular evolves pretty dramatically. I mean, for those that aren't familiar with it, it begins with a gruesome murder of a young boy, and it's, essentially like a cop drama to begin with, but then takes a very unusual turn. It gets incredibly supernatural. And at this point, the entire series isn't out, so I haven't seen the conclusion of it. But there is a really dramatic shift in particularly, I think, episode 5, which was my favorite episode that I've seen so far, to be honest with you. I loved where episode 5 went, and I feel like that's the episode where you start to really establish who the villain is, at least who I think it is, only 7 episodes in so far. And that was the episode, Igor, where you're directing and Zak, you're shooting it. So I want to kind of continue this idea of the evolving visuals of a series, but starting with Zak on episode 5. You come in, this is your first of 3. You certainly want to maintain some sort of consistency, but what did you add to it to give it your spin and to help support the now evolving storyline?
Well, I don't know if I could point to a specific thing that I changed or added to it. Certainly the script came in and it was a wonderful opportunity to explore the more sort of supernatural elements involved. I think there was some great stuff happening at night. Some dream sequence moments. So there were a few really nice visual moments to play with. But I don't know. I mean, Igor, do you feel like we changed much in terms of the look from the first 4 episodes?
I think the look did change a little bit into the moody. I think it's it is a slow paced series. So a lot of it is happening in a slow paced thing, a slow paced rhythm. But then I think there are particularly moody sequences that we developed.
Yeah.
They were just like slowly building tensions, a little suspense, slow moving camera. I think we did a fair amount of that, and also I think a few things in camera moves where we deliberately moved towards like backs of characters. We kind of explored that as well. So I think there are certain elements that were part of the narrative, obviously, and then and I think Zak did an amazing job, and it was really beautiful collaboration because Zak is very prepared, and I learned quite a few things from him as well. So it was a great experience.
One of the really interesting things was just. I had never really tried to embody another cinematographer's style in such a way. And it was really an interesting exercise, trying to not necessarily do things the way that I would do them, but, put myself in Igor's place and think about how he might approach a scene or framing or lighting. I think certainly naturally, perhaps we share some aesthetic interest in our work, though. I think methodology and approaches might be different at times, of course, as anyone's would be. But I learned so much by just trying to ask myself sometimes, like how would Igor approach this, and then playing with those ideas. It just kind of. I think there's a lot I've taken from it and continue to see in my work now.
Did you have any conflicts on set? Like I can imagine being a cinematographer who's also directing. Sometimes you just want to be like, can you just do it this way?
Well, I'll tell you what. I think Igor and I got into screaming matches every single day. No,
really?
No. I don't think there was.
See, now I'm excited. I love the juicy gossip. That's what I'm going for.
Yeah, unfortunately, not much there.
Interview over. As a director of photography for the series you're working on now, directing. is it easy to just let go of that side and put all your attention on directing?
Yes, because directing is not something that I'm completely comfortable with. I think it's something that I enjoyed, and but the fact that you have other tasks to do. You have so much to do as a director that having somebody on the that can take care of all these things that are visual. You discuss things and everything, but then I leave the set and talk to the actors and try to figure out what we're gonna do, how we're gonna do it, and then come back and be like, okay, Zak is always prepared, always ready, always doing amazing work. So for me, this was just a relief. To think about that would be hard. If I had to do shoot and direct at the same time, that would be much harder. It's so I think it was actually just a great relief to actually have somebody that you can completely trust, and somebody that that will do better than you do. So it's
I'm always amazed at DPs that direct and some of the examples of people who do both. Like Reed Morano, who's done a couple projects where she's shot and directed, and it just I mean it is a lot. It's amazing to me.
Let's take a quick break and talk about a very special application that has completely changed the way that I collaborate in Final Cut Pro 10. Now, a lot of you guys know I edit a lot. I edit a lot of the stuff that I work on, and my entire studio here at BC Media Productions is based on Final Cut Pro 10. That is our edit NLE of choice. Now, for a while, Final Cut Pro 10 didn't have the best and most seamless collaboration tools, right? Yes, you can collaborate with it, but there was this process of transferring libraries to and from, and it was a little bit clunky, I'm not going to lie. Now, PostLab changes all of that. PostLab is a collaboration tool for Final Cut that is seamless, works amazing, and it enables users to share libraries, track and save changes, and make sure that no more than one person is working on the same library at the same time. So that means zero conflicts and a recallable history of your project. Now, they do two things great. One, they have an amazing cloud service that PostLab is hosted on. Now, if some of you have tried to put Final Cut libraries on other cloud services, you know that it doesn't always work out that well. But with PostLab, it's different because PostLab's cloud is made specifically for Final Cut libraries. That's what it's built for. So it's a seamless process and they do not break. Now, the other side of that is that PostLab is also a desktop app. So you don't have to worry about being connected to the PostLab cloud or even the internet at all because you're always working on a full local copy of your production. So this is the best way to collaborate in Final Cut Pro 10, and this will absolutely change your workflow for the better. Now, here's the best part. You get 3 months free by going to gocreativeshow.com/PostLab. 3 free months of this amazing game-changing application that is sure to enhance your Final Cut Pro 10 experience. So check it out now and get 3 months free at gocreativeshow.com/PostLab. We got a question from one of our Facebook followers, Diego Fabricio Diaz Palomo. I hope I'm saying that right. He says, I'd like to know the approach to get this awesome, really dark cinematography because even in exteriors with sunlight, it looks very dark. Who wants to take that one? So both are laughing. So this is going to be a good answer. Let's start with you, Igor, since you sort of set the pace with the first two.
I mean, the idea is to technically, well, it's very simple. Technically, you try to bring the highlights and midtones as far down as you can, and you as you do that, you open up the blacks. So what you create, your entire image is happening in these murky tones, and you don't have the image that is stretched, that is like the whites are white and blacks are black, but everything is kind of pulled down into those dark murky tones. But yeah. I think in general the idea was to have that kind of brownish, greenish, dusty, dirty look, and exteriors were treated as the interiors as well. Like it's instead of developing an image that has highlights that are blooming, we brought everything down and kept it in that range of murky range. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Zak? The idea of this dark cinematography and how you achieved it?
Yeah, I mean, we were really working in the bottom half of the image, or even really just the toe. I mean, there were times, where Michael Kim, our DIT, was kind of my therapist, and I just had to double check, like, we're sure this is good. We're sure this is okay. It's really dark. Yeah, but I mean, I think though that style creates a really just a beautiful, this kind of beautiful, kind of painterly, pastel-y texture that that's just, it's like it's the only way you can get it is with that kind of compressing the range of the image.
I think in general, there's I forgot now who said that, but he was referring to photography, and he said the good photography is always on the edge of the disaster. Like on the edge of catastrophe, where like everything is going to fall apart. So pushing it into that territory kind of excites me. Like if we and also like the idea of hiding is something that excites me a lot in cinematography, because it's if you present everything to the audience, if it's all out there, they don't have anything to do. They are just receiving the information. But if you hide things, in the darkness or in the murkiness, then suddenly, people have to work. The eye has to work. The eye has to wander through the image, and you guide the eye through like focus and bright elements, and then you break it up, and then you have a bright scene that kind of wakes people up, and then you go back. So I think that's the philosophy behind it.
Oh, we're going to talk about focus. Don't you worry. But before, I just want to talk, just to kind of round out this thing. You say you're working in the toe, you're working in the bottom half of the image. What are you talking about? Your color grade approach, or are there things that you're actually doing on camera, in camera, on set with filtration and different things to work in that toe, as you say?
Yeah, I mean that's on set. That's in camera. Where we're dealing with underexposing in camera, and then also at the DIT level, further massaging and pushing things down.
And you start with lookup table. We start with a lookup table that is already low contrast, and that will allow you to actually bring the image further down. So when you have a lookup table that is where the colors and the brightness and contrast is not stretched, but it's kind of like already in the middle. Then once you bring it a little bit further down, exposing it, you already are close to that look. So there is not. Obviously, there is some stuff to be done in a DIT tent, but the starting point is already there.
It's really close.
Yeah.
Yes.
So are you just setting, like you're looking at the monitor and you're saying, okay, I'm going to, instead of having my whites at 90 or whatever, we'll have them at 60 or something. Like, do you kind of set these parameters and just use them as your guide throughout the series?
I certainly was. I was looking at often where my highlights were and thinking in those terms, 50, 60 IRE. And I don't know if Igor, if you were doing the same approach wise, or just kind of.
Yes. I think this was the approach for the series.
Did either of you use any filters on your cameras?
I don't think so. Nothing. I mean, nothing big. Here and there, polarizer, ND grads. And lots of NDs.
Oh, a lot of grads.
Yeah.
I did a lot of grads, which was great.
And lots of NDs to bringing down the exposure, and that's about it. I don't know. I don't think we used anything else. Did you use anything, Zak?
No, I mean, I ended up getting. We had the Sony Venice, so we had internal NDs, and I ended up bringing in a half stop ND even, because I was finding when dealing with, we were so specifically working in this lower part of the image that even getting to that half stop level was really important, because everything we tried to shoot wide open. So we really were, the only filtration I was really using was were NDs and grad NDs to control exposure. We also used diopters for quite a few close-ups, and we were switching between. We tried to use Leica Rs as much as possible, and then we had some Cooke S7s to fill out our set. And the Leica Rs, that's instead of a filter, those lenses have so much character that they really, I think, impart a lot of the feeling to the image.
It's interesting to me that you shot on the Sony Venice. Not interesting in the way that, why did you do that? But like, you often hear so many times now, people are going immediately to the Alexas and the Arri lines of cameras. You see Red a lot. I don't hear a lot about Sony Venice being used, and I'm curious how you came to that decision. I think the visuals on the Sony Venice are awesome, but as everybody knows in the audience, I'm a Sony guy.
I did tests before feature. I did a feature before this series where I tested the 4 cameras. We did fairly extensive testing, and then for the Outsider, we also did a test. We did test with Sony Venice and I believe LF, and we tested lots of lenses. And then projected it, and I find it that these days the difference between cameras is minimal. It's really, really, really minimal. Manufacturers would like probably to say that one camera is much better than the other. I don't think so. I think
you're really not jockeying for a sponsorship, are you?
I never was, and never will, because at the end, this is the tool we work. It's our paintbrush, it's our paint, and you choose the paint that suits you the most. But at the end, it's really I would project it the tests. We did it in Harbor, and Joe Galler, who's a great colorist, was he worked on this feature I did. We projected blind for both of us, and we needed to guess which camera is which. That was funny. It was really funny. Then like we would come in super close, like to the point where we were like just standing in front of the big screen, like maybe like 4 feet away and looking at the grain and stuff.
Did you guess correctly?
Barely, like here and there. It's like that's probably like 52% of time.
Yeah.
It's really not. Especially when you touch the image a little bit in the coloring suite. One camera is a little greener, one camera is a little bit better with highlights, one is a little bit better in the top. But I think it's not about that. I think right now it's about the choice of lenses and about your creative abilities.
Yes,
that's something that is important, I think, to say, because it's also important to shift the conversation towards creative side rather than talking about cameras and pixels and other like things that really don't make sense to me. So I think finally we have to take that conversation into our turf, because it's a cinematographer's medium, and manufacturers and camera people are amazing, and we should be thankful for what they are doing. But at the same time, I think it's important that we emphasize our creative choices and what we can do as humans to improve another aspect of visual storytelling.
Zach, have you had experience with the Venice before?
No, when we shot, the Venice was relatively new. So that was definitely my first outing with it.
What were your thoughts?
I largely agree with Igor. There's, at this point in time, digital cinematography has really come to a place where, largely there's not a ton of difference between different camera bodies and what they can accomplish. For me, lenses are a much bigger choice. And potentially now also format. Now you're seeing large format versus Super 35. There's also some, I think, interesting choices to be had there. So yeah, but I thought the Venice was a great machine. It's certainly a top tier camera, and happy to use it on anything.
We got a question from Instagram here. At Sweensy asks, I noticed most of the subjects are lit super soft / underexposed with just a kiss of backlight. And his question is, how do you expose so delicately where subjects are dark but retain just the perfect amount of detail? Are you using false color, your eyes? Are you exposing a certain number of stops under? So we answered this a little bit, but maybe you guys can collaborate just a touch more on this approach to having, a little bit of a stronger backlight than a front light, and that balance between being dark but not too dark and still having detail.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's interesting. I don't really often think in terms of front light or backlight or these kind of notions. Maybe I would put a little backlight on somebody if I want maybe some separation from a background, or if it's getting muddy and I don't want that. But I don't really think in those terms. And in terms of exposure, I think we touched upon that. There's a lot that was developed for the look of the show. And then, on set, we're kind of hitting certain benchmarks with our shadows and our highlights in terms of IRE scale. And you can look at the IRE scale in different ways, whether it's a false color or waveform or whatever tool you prefer. Yeah, and then obviously there's the approach to lighting was such that we as much as possible would try to avoid hard light on people's faces. Any sort of really hot highlights that might be in the background, we would take extra time to kind of treat with some dulling spray or remove. So we'd even like the really like hot pings of light that sometimes happen in the world, off a car or something, we would always take care to control. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Igor? Anything?
Yeah, I think that's it. You start, working on series is very interesting because you spend time, fair amount of time shooting. So your eye starts like seeing details more and more every day. Your eye becomes more critical on everything you see, and knowing that you have monitors that are calibrated and you rely a lot on the look itself, because at the end that's how the audience is going to perceive it. They're going to be just looking at it without having any technical tools on their disposal to check if it's 30 IR8 or if it's 50. So it's you just rely on your vision.
I assume the production designer is involved in this as well. I mean, if you're kind of keeping your whites down to a certain level, your art department has to know that, and they have to be able to accommodate in wardrobe and set and all that to make sure that there aren't these gigantic crazy pops of color that you have to adjust to.
For sure.
And how closely are you working with production design on these things?
That was partly set up by Jason, because Jason Bateman was really controlling that in the first two episodes, and then he took care of most of the decisions regarding the costumes and production design. Then everyone knew that we are not bringing any like crazy blues or reds, on set, and so it's always kind of a muted palette of colors wherever we go, either in costume design or production design.
I feel like The Outsider is a masterclass in two things: framing and camera movement. Watching The Outsider, the first two episodes, I'm like, that's Igor. Now, I know a lot of cinematographers probably don't want to think of themselves as having a particular trademark in a particular style. There is something in The Night Of, there is something in House of Cards that carries over to The Outsider, and I think largely it's your framing choice. And I'd love to talk to you a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain sensibility that everyone has, and people tend to see world in their own way. So I think either by choice or not, certain decisions you make transfer from film to film. And I think when on a more scrutinized look, I think there is a fair difference between The Night Of and The Outsider, where The Night Of had much more edgier framing, and Outsider is a little bit more conventional. But at the same time, yes, there are certain things that that are part of the look in both. But one important thing is that I had the same operator on the Night Off and The Outsider, Ben Semenoff. Ben is an incredible operator. I really like working with him, and he was definitely instrumental in bringing his own vision to it as well, and that's the entire beauty of it. I would also say Ari Isler is a great operator. He was a big camera operator for first 2 episodes, 2.5 maybe, and then he became a camera operator. Both amazing, great guys, and so you find people you connect on a level of understanding the visuals and understanding what the look should be, and then they carry it through. And I think that certainly was helpful when I directed, that Ari was there as well. And I don't know.
Was there a discussion about the way you're going to frame this? And the reason that I ask is because what I saw the focus being in unique areas. You'd pull the entire attention of the frame in like the bottom left for something, leave a ton of negative space. You also have a ton of situations where you're in a single shot and you're blowing through pages and everyone is just in the perfect place in the frame. Like, there had to have been discussions about the way you approach framing because it was so unique and striking and different.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely were discussions. There's a lot of reference shared, and we're looking at a lot of kind of off framings and frame in frame, and but largely it's important to remember that those framing choices are largely driven by story and character elements. So perhaps you want to make somebody feel kind of boxed in or constrained, contained in some way, by having some sort of off frame with a lot of negative space, or maybe they're constrained in the frame by a doorway or some other lines. But certainly, and then it's also such collaboration with the operators, the directors, the actors. You're setting up a shot. You're making the blocking work with the framing, and drawing the viewer's eye and attention to specific areas. And I think that's early on. It was I know Igor and Jason set up this thing where you could do limited coverage. You could play a scene from one locked off shot. And I think that kind of stuff is great.
Well, you certainly have to do that in TV because the pace is faster, and you got to blow through pages. And I can assume that there's going to be situations.
A lot of TV, you find that there's a lot of pressure to get coverage on everything. Like we need that close up, we need to get the medium and the close and the wide, and you end up getting this kind of very conventional coverage that comes out. And to me, that always smells like TV. And I think that what was great about The Outsider was that top to bottom, everybody was really running away from anything that felt like conventional TV. It was the minute something was kind of going down that path, people would try to point it out and say, oh, that feels like that smells like TV. Let's avoid that.
So decisions weren't made to speed up the amount of pages you're shooting.
Absolutely not.
No.
Because when we on episode 5 particularly, we designed every shot in advance. The entire episode was shot listed. There was no. We did change certain things when we were on set, but
there's always better ideas that come up, of course.
But I would say I don't know, maybe like 80%. Was it 80%, Zak? Something like that.
I think I think we had a plan for every single scene, and I think to a large extent we followed that plan. But at times completely other ideas came up, and we would chase that down, and it would be stronger for it.
But it was a very particular plan too, because we would actually know that we have 5 shots to cover that scene, and we would and we knew exactly what are the shots and what are the perspectives and so on. So it wasn't like something that we came on a set and we were like, oh, we don't have time and let's do it in one shot. We knew when we were doing one shot that it's going to be one shot. We knew that before we started to shoot.
Oh no, I'm not saying that you decided that on set. Yeah. I'm saying that a decision was made, like, if we can tell this story in one shot, that should be the approach we do because it's aesthetically the style of the show. It also allows us to get a lot of content in one shot in the day, but it also looks really cool. Like what was there ever a thought about how much you can shoot in a day that came into play when making the decision to have a one-shot scene?
I mean, there's always going to be limitations with time and money, and you're always going to be boxed in. It seems like no matter what you're shooting, no matter what the budget, there's not enough time and money.
Yeah.
But that being said, that what drove the decisions in terms of coverage and framing were story and character, and everything starts with that, and you go from there.
Well, let's talk about that. What is it from a story standpoint? What does a single shot say that, a 2 or 3 camera coverage scene not say? What is different in that?
I always think of it in terms of contrast. There's you're creating maybe a contrast with pacing or framing. You could have one scene that has a lot of quick edits, and then go to a next scene that's one single locked off shot. And I think that the kind of those two things rubbing against each other, for me, create something dynamic and interesting that you can hopefully it underlines some sort of story, plot, or character element. But I don't know how you feel, Igor.
Yeah, I think so. I think what one shot says brings in is the concept of time. So you as a viewer, you become aware of the time, and often you can go into direction of building suspense by allowing the time to pass, and especially if you have a slow creep and slow move, or you're extending the time. You're basically, it becomes like, you want to show that character is experiencing boredom, or character is within some institution and he's expecting something to happen but nothing happens. So stuff like that. I think it definitely has to do with perception of time. And contrast, as you said, Zak, I think that's a very valid point, because if you have a really fast-paced scenes, then once you come to a moment of stillness, then that moment of stillness says something about why you decided to be still and not cutting from one to another.
For me too, just watching it, when I see an entire scene play out in one shot, it forces me to pay a lot of attention to reactions. Like I'm looking at other people more so than I would. Like I'd be looking at the person that isn't talking much more, because I have the opportunity to do that. The shot is lingering longer. I can look around at reactions. I feel like it's more as if I'm in the room. It's more real life,
Absolutely. I mean, one thing to learn about that and about passage of time, if anyone is interested, should read Transcendent Style in Cinema by Paul Schrader. He's it's a great book. It's a great book, and also
what is it again? I'll put a link to it in the show notes. What's it called?
Transcendent Style in Cinema. But you can also go on YouTube and you can listen Paul Schrader talks in Rotterdam Film Festival and Toronto Film Festival masterclasses. He actually dissects that in a way that is extraordinary, I think, and explaining like what actually happens as you watch movies that deal with passage of time as an element. There is a excellent thing that when I was a student, my teacher once told me the difference between the cinema that is classical narrative cinema that and experimental cinema is almost like a basketball game, where in classical narrative cinema, the time is when the ball is in the game. That's what the time is. Where the narrative happens. But in experimental cinema and cinema that kind of pushes the boundaries a little bit more is about the time in between. It's the time when the ball is outside of the court. So I think it kind of explains a little bit of where the cinema could go.
Let's take a quick break and talk about what production is really all about. Production is about a couple of things for me. And now I'm a producer and a director, so I'm embedded in this stuff. Production for me is about peace of mind, and it's about a partnership. And that's what I get with Rule Boston Camera. Now, Rule is the place to go to purchase and rent all of your production equipment. Whenever big, huge Hollywood films come into Boston, they all use Rule. And I use Rule too, for a variety of reasons. One, I get amazing customer service when I go to Rule. I mean, I really have a partnership with them. They are a production partner. They're just as dedicated to your project as you are. So you're going to get technical guidance when you take equipment out for your shoot, and they're committed to support you the entire time you have their equipment with you. Now, the other thing is that Rule Boston Camera has a gigantic world-class inventory of cameras, audio, lighting, grip gear, communications, camera dynamics. Everything you want is there. They've been in business for over 35 years, nearly 40 years now, so you can imagine what they have amassed in their inventory. So you get a huge inventory, you get amazing customer service, and what does that equal out to? Peace of mind and a production partner. The two most important things in production. That's why I continue to use Rule, and go to rule.com to experience it for yourself. Rule Boston Camera, you'll find them at rule.com, RULE.com. I want to talk about your use of focus, or probably more correctly, defocus in The Outsider. There's a lot of scenes and a lot of shots where you are out of focus on action that is important. People are coming from out of focus into focus. Your focus pulling in the direction that you take with that is so different and unique in this series. And I'd love to talk to you about that philosophy and why it was done.
But I think focus is one of the overrated elements of cinema.
How so?
Because, why would you always see in focus? Why? First of all, I think there is a creative way of using focus to emphasize elements of the frame you want to emphasize. And also sometimes to misdirect the attention. And also, allowing audience to work, getting the audience to find within a frame what's important, and not to give them everything at the same time and say, okay, this is what you're looking at. And that, when you hide things in out of focusness, the audience has to, participate. And as we all know, cinema and the movie making is, and movie experience, just watching movies is the two-way conversation, because it's not just what you are getting from the screen. It's also what you are bringing back. What you're projecting to the screen, you as a viewer, because we all have different ways of seeing certain situations in life or in cinema. So I think it's crucial to establish this conversation.
I've seen that you've sort of employed that theory and that sort of focus defocus approach in The Night Of. So I can only assume that you were kind of pushing that a little bit in this series, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong. But did you have any pushback from your directors, or your director? You only worked with Jason on this, but do you have any pushback when you're trying to do something like that? It's because it's one of those things where it's like, it looks awesome. In theory, it's great. But when you're actually looking at it on set and you're saying, okay, we're deciding on this, we're committing to this, there must be a little bit of fear.
Yes. I mean, but Jason was great. I mean, Jason is really, first of all, his sets are amazing. I think he's one of the rare filmmakers that can come on set and really create a drama-free environment. And within that, we were able to experiment. Sometimes he would just be like, no, it doesn't go. I'm not interested. Sometimes he would say, yeah, let's go for it. So it's all about like presenting it in a way that makes sense for the narrative. If you have a good reason why you're doing it, and you are able to explain that, and then sometimes it's accepted, and sometimes it's not. But the idea is that anyone can come in and give a suggestion and say, how about this? And then that's where the director comes in and says, this is we're going to use this, or we're not going to use it. So but I think it's a playful device, that people are for a long time afraid of experimenting with, and I always look at it as why wouldn't we use that as much as we use shadows.
Yeah. Zak, what was your experience kind of playing with focus a little bit and trying out new things in that way?
Well, I mean, I think that to a large extent, we were staying within, the boundaries of what had been set up, and that shallow focus is really an element of the style of the show. I mean, I love shallow focus. It's something I do in my own work often. So it wasn't necessarily something new or novel for me. But
it's not even that it's shallow focus. There are scenes that are just out of focus. there are moments where it's like, I can't see what is. You're looking at the screen and you're saying, the thing that I think I should be paying attention to, I can't see.
Yeah.
And it makes you want to see it even more.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to when we're telling a story, to use every element at our disposal. Exposure, color, framing, and focus is another one of those elements. And whether you're drawing the viewer's eye to something we want them to see or concealing something we don't want them to see, this is a huge tool in our kit. And to me, it's absurd not to use it. And maybe you do want to play with deep focus. That's completely fine as well. If it's appropriate for the story and what you're doing.
I said earlier that I really think The Outsider is a masterclass in camera movement. I truly do. I love the way that you guys approach camera movement. There is one technique in particular that I want to start with, and I'd never seen this before. Maybe that's just my lack of knowledge in cinema. But there are many scenes in the show where you reveal characters through camera movement. Like you'd start on a wide shot that has one person in it and they're talking, but they're talking to other people and you don't see them. And then as you move the camera, items in the frame start to shift and change and move, revealing the people that they're speaking with. I don't know if that rings a bell for you guys, but it's happened a bunch of times in the series. And I've never seen that approach to camera movement before. And I think it's one of the many ways that you move the camera in the piece that is really stunning. So you can start there, or you can start just in general about your philosophy of camera movement. But I'd like to start with you, Igor, on this, because I feel like this is something that I've seen from your work before.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's I love the idea of hiding things from the audience, because that you pick the interest. It's like how do you pick the interest of somebody? Like you do it with kids, like you do it with the interest is always there when there is a mystery. So how do you create a mystery? Is by hiding it, by not showing, by it's very at the very beginning of The Outsider when the man that came in to be interrogated, that discovered this horrible murder. We start like that. We start on a wall, and then we discover one character, and we don't know who is he talking to, and then we slowly camera moves and picks, and you pay attention to what he's saying. Is like you want to know what is. So you invest as a viewer. You're immediately in the. It draws you in. So I think that's one of the elements of the camera moves that we did, and it's deliberate, but it's a slow move. So the slowness of it, the slow pacing of it, also helps generate the interest and generate the involvement from the audience.
Zak, thoughts on camera movement?
Yeah, I mean, I always like to approach camera movement again from story, and usually I like to move the camera if there's either some subtextual reason to. Or sometimes also perhaps a physical reason if somebody's moving in the frame. And I also think, the process of discovering elements as the camera moves is important. Again, it goes back to revealing or concealing elements at specific times for effect. The same way you might use focus, you can use camera movement.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. The way I think that you hit it on the head. What is different about the camera movement that the two of you and the other cinematographers as well on The Outsider have done is this idea of revealing. Everybody in our audience, I'm sure, has sliders and gimbals. The idea of moving your camera is not foreign anymore. Everybody can do it. You can do it for cheap. You can do it. The stabilization on a phone is so good. You can just do a camera move on your phone. But there is a difference between just moving a camera because it looks cool and moving a camera because it's story-driven. And I think you guys really do a great job at that. And I'd love to talk to you about when you're looking at the script, what are some of the elements that stand out to you to say, okay, this is a perfect moment to move the camera?
I mean, it can be a moment where, the character discovers something. I mean, we had a great scene where Cynthia Erivo is walking to a place, abandoned house, and she's kind of looking through the details of the house and trying to discover what it is. Whose house is it? What's going on there? What are the details that she can connect to, so she can actually piece this puzzle together? And immediately that tells you have to move the camera. You have to become her eyes. It has to be subjective camera. So when the camera becomes subjective, it's one of the most potent tools of cinema. That's something that movement. Sometimes it's movement, sometimes it's not. But like a slow movement, as somebody's passing through a space and becomes that point of view, it's immediately tells you there has to be a movement. Or if you want to build a tension where like nothing is happening, the frame is completely still, and the camera slowly moves.
Yeah,
that's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes, and I also think it's important to note that when you are not moving the camera, that helps kind of underline when you do. So you need.
How do you mean?
You need both to really paint the whole picture.
What do you mean by that? By not moving it underscores when you do.
Well, I just mean to say, if you have a scene where the camera is completely locked off, it's not moving, and then in the next shot you do have a movement, you have some subtle movement, and now all of a sudden that movement means something because you've created a difference in the shot.
And when is that decision made? Like, are you making these decisions on your location scout? Are you kind of just figuring it out while you're seeing the performance? When do you make the decision to move that camera?
I mean, a lot of the camera moves were already in our shot list. So it was, and the shot lists were made some before we saw location and some after or while we were seeing the locations. But a lot of that literally comes from the script. And we knew that certain things are going to be static, and we knew that certain scenes are going to be done with a movement. Correct? I mean,
so those moves are
Zak,
are written in the script.
Yeah.
Are they coming from the directors in the script?
They're not written in the script, but they're just interpretation of the script.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. It seems like this overarching theme from both of you guys is that you want to make the audience work a little bit. You want to engage the audience more than just having them passively watch something. You want them to kind of actively scan the frame and figure out what's going on. And I think that's the real essence of a mystery. And that's kind of what this show is.
That's exactly right. I don't know what else to do. I mean, to me, the only thing I know how to do is look at the story and try to figure out how to tell that visually. And if you're not doing that, I just think you're squandering a huge part of what you're doing visually. But
also at the same time, this is a very slow moving procedural, and we have seen procedurals for like years now, and so how do you actually generate the involvement from the audience, and how do you actually get them to feel for those characters, and to because there is not much information going their way. It's slow, super slow moving. When you think about it, you discover in first 2 episodes that there is something strange happening, but not much is besides that happens. It's just like kind of like piecing the pieces of puzzle together, and then that's where I think the visuals come in, and the visuals are driving the tension, driving the developing this suspense and uneasiness, because the story is about 2 different principles. It's a rational reason, principle of reason, and then subconscious principle of faith, and then the conflict between the two. So the visuals are here to kind of help present one and another, and because we are dealing with something that is painting the subconscious of a certain place and characters within the place, the visuals are representing that, because we are allowed to then to go deeper into the darkness, because we are exploring the darkness of human nature.
Yeah, I was watching it I watched episode 7, I think, last night, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this show has so many things going against it in a way where it's slow, it's dreary, it's supernatural, and you have to fight against that as the viewer, or not the viewer, you have to fight against that as the storytellers to make sure that the audience is paying attention, make sure the audience is with you, even when it gets supernatural, that they're still connecting to the characters. And it's like, it's masterfully done, because I don't really like those things. I don't like slow-moving supernatural pieces. And I am completely engaged with this from the first second it's on to the last. I'm watching the extra features. I'm going online and learning about it. I'm obsessed with it. And there's something about the way you guys are telling this story that's reaching someone like me who doesn't really like that kind of stuff.
I'm glad it's happening.
Yeah, you have no answers why. You're just happy it's happening.
No, but I think part of the reason is that those supernatural things are not big. They're not loud. Yeah. They're also not it's not like we are not screeching and screaming, and the sound design in the visuals. The camera is not like speeding towards the characters and like swooshing on a big cranes, and it's a quiet piece. It's a quiet piece that's a slow brewing, or slow burning. I think that's what gets you.
Well, I absolutely love it, if you can't tell that by now. And I think both of your work is just so great in this series, and of course your entire portfolio. And we're going to put a link to all the information about your websites and your IMDb in the show notes. Is there anything you'd like to close us with? Do you want to plug your Instagrams? What do you guys, any closing thoughts as we wrap up here? We'll start with you, Zak.
No, nothing. Just, thanks for taking interest and listening.
And of course, you're on Instagram at Zak Mulligan, ZAKMUL. My eyes are going. MULLIGAN.
That's right. There you go. You plugged it for me. That's
there
great.
You go. ZAK Mulligan. Igor, any closing thoughts about the film, about the series, what you're working on next, your Instagram? What do you want people to know?
I don't have any social media presence. My website is completely outdated. I would say maybe 2 years, maybe even more. And I don't know. We'll see. It's I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'm glad the series resonates with the audience. And till the next one.
There you go. I love that. Igor Martinovic and Zak Mulligan, thank you so much for being on Go Creative Show, talking about The Outsider. Of course, The Outsider is on HBO, so you guys get your subscriptions, watch the series. I mean, HBO is amazing anyway, but The Outsider is certainly a big reason to grab those subscriptions and check it out for yourself. So thank you guys so much for being on, and we're going to have you back. You've already been on multiple times, so you can't hide from us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I want to thank Igor Martinovic and Zak Mulligan for coming back on Go Creative Show to talk about their experience with The Outsiders, which if you guys have not seen it, I strongly encourage that you do. It's so, so good. You know what else is good? Working with my two buddies over here, Matt Russell and Connor Crosby. Of course, Matt is the genius behind the sound of the podcast. He mixes and masters and makes it sound so good. You can also do this for your work, as he does for me all the time. All of the work you see at bcmediaproductions.com, chances are Matt mixed it because he's the best and I always want to use him. And you can use him too by going to gainstructure.com and on Twitter @gainstructure. Of course, Connor Crosby, our fantastic producer here who's making it all happen behind the scenes. You can find him at ignitionvisuals.com, ignitionvisuals.com. Of course, check out me on social media. You can find me at Ben Consoli, at BenConsoli. I've been very, very active on Instagram, posting all sorts of work and behind-the-scenes clips and some of my favorite visual effects clips that I find on Instagram. So I'm getting more and more active there. And if you want an inside look as to what I'm doing when I'm not doing Go Creative Show, that is the place to go. Find me on Instagram at Ben Consoli. Of course, you have to check out gocreativeshow.com and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on social media, and all will be good in the world. We're putting out this episode every week. We love doing it, and we'd love to hear from you. So find us on our website, gocreativeshow.com, and let us know what you think. And lastly, I want to thank our sponsors, PostLab, stress-free collaboration for Final Cut Pro 10, and Rule Boston Camera, the perfect place to go to purchase and rent all of your production equipment. Without those people, the show wouldn't exist, so please support those that support us, and we will see you next week.